Togetherness is a challenge these days, unlike the early days when APEC was just founded. As the executive director, how do you see your role as rallying the crowd on board for cooperation?
When APEC was founded, the kind of language that we put forward, that it's a very diversified region. We have big economies, we have small economies, we have advanced economies, we have emerging economies. So that sense of diversity is built into APEC's DNA. And that has continued throughout our entire history. Now, what's important about APEC is that togetherness has enabled tremendous growth. So in some economies, we've seen incomes more than double. For others, they've increased tenfold. And that's part of the magic of APEC, that everyone is doing well together. There are challenges, but thinking through those challenges and finding solutions to the problems that we face today is the center and it's the focus of the work that we do.
Elephant in the room, tariff. Because APEC has been founded 30 years ago based on the concept of free trade. Now, if the tariff continue to be a threat for everyone, where is APEC's attractiveness? Many would question. What do you think?
What we really try to do is focus on the issues that we can work on together. So, for example, trade, it's important to all of us, but what should be the rules of trade? So if we turn back the clock 30 years, we weren't really talking about the digital economy. We weren't talking about artificial intelligence. So what kind of rules should we have today? Updated. So that's the kind of work that we can do as an incubator to think of ideas, rules, regulations that can then be brought into the multilateral trading system that will ensure its relevance as we move forward. There are other issues that we look at, for example, supply chain resilience. As we all learned during the COVID pandemic, supply chains can be very brittle. If they break down, the goods don't come to us. So what is it that we can do to ensure that the goods flow freely?
For example, China and the United States. Earlier, we have seen some successful discussions between the two sides in Malaysia on the sideline of the ASEAN summit. How do you see the momentum from there? And how does APEC, as the Secretariat is concerned, try to facilitate the right ambience for more productive dialogues and discussions between the two sides?
Yes, we had the ASEAN meetings earlier this month. Even earlier than that, we had the APEC trade ministers meet, where you had a consensus document in spite of the sort of differences in opinion over trade policy. So in terms of setting an environment that we have, it's a very relaxing atmosphere. We're here in Gyeongju. It's the ancient Chile capital. And so it provides a backdrop in which people think about the past, if you like, and then they look towards the future. And that's something that the citizens here are very proud of, that it's one of the world's oldest telescopes, the oldest observatory. Very, very proud of the city being a UNESCO heritage site. And so this is the kind of atmosphere that we would have that lead to conversations that are productive. And that's what APEC does. It encourages dialogue. And that's why these platforms are important. If we didn't have an APEC, where would these conversations take place? You can do things bilaterally. It's proven, as you know very well, difficult to find a venue. Everyone was speculating, when will President Xi and President Trump meet? And that's throughout the whole year. But finally, they're meeting here in Korea because APEC is meeting here.
In the region, among economies, besides wonderful platforms like APEC, there are also trade arrangements such as RCEP, such as CPTPP, which involve many of the APEC member economies. And there are also talks about other trade arrangements. Now, as the executive director of the Secretariat, how do you look at all these options? How are you going to once again motivate them to benefit the ultimate topics of this year's discussion about trade, for example?
Well, these concepts, CPTPP, RCEP, are also embedded in APEC's vision of a free trade area of the Asia Pacific. Now, if you go back a few years and, why did people think of this FTAP? There were two things. One is that the Doha Development Round wasn't moving anywhere. And second, that we had this proliferation of trade agreements. And businesses were complaining that it's too complicated. I run this supply chain, but I have to go through multiple rules of origin. So that's what FTAP was all about. So what I think about that is to work together to simplify things and find ways that really facilitate trade in our region.
Earlier, China and ASEAN countries also have been talking and discussing in depth while coming up with some scripts already for the updated version of free trade. What do you expect that kinds of cooperation among the global south, in a way, so to speak, can speed up the real discussions going on worldwide about trade, including on the platform like APEC?
So this is all momentum, improving the FTAs, improving their coverage also encourages others to come on board. So without CPTPP, what else would we have? It really brings people together to say, what do we need to do moving forward? So we see different configurations of economies coming forward and saying, well, CPTPP has happened. What else can we do?
Yes. I want to ask you a few questions related to some interesting concepts. Earlier, we talked over the decades in APEC about cooperation, but now these days the word competition is being mentioned so much. So what do you think about this philosophical relations, in a way, between competition and cooperation?
We all want to do well. We want to compete. We want, say, from a corporate perspective, I want to make money. So let me put it
that is the goal of corporate,
very simple
right?
means. So I will do my best to make the very competitive product. And there are others that will say, I have the best product. And that produces better consumer welfare. So there's competition, but there's also some cooperation in that process. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is improve the living standards and lives for all of our people.
Well said. But what about the concept of short-term and long-term? Some have been complaining about the issues of short-termism, so to speak, among policymakers. What do you think?
Over the short term, we do see this complex world that's changing. But over the long term, there are so many challenges that we're facing, including technology, including climate change. So what are the challenges that we're facing today? Immediately, for example, in our region, we're very susceptible to natural disasters. So there's work that we need to do to adapt, if you like, adapt our infrastructure so that our people are less vulnerable. Over the longer term, we'll be looking at mitigation. How do we reduce the carbon footprint of our industry? So we see that with huge deployment of solar cells, more EVs on the cars, and wind power. So this is, there's a short-term thing where we have to adapt to that reality, but over the future, it's mitigating the root cause of the problem.